The most feared man in the city was supposed to vanish inside a hotel laundry cart before midnight, wrapped in stained linen, too drugged to speak, too weak to fight, and too important for the world to ever know he had been carried out through the servant's door. The men pushing him through the lower halls of the Grand Aurelia Hotel wore suits that cost more than Leah Moreno made in months, but their faces were calm in the cruel way only powerful men could afford. They did not look frightened. They did not rush like criminals. They moved like men who believed the whole city had already agreed to look away. And maybe it had. In a hotel built for diamonds, senators, movie stars, and quiet monsters with clean hands, nobody paid attention to a fat banquet server in worn-out shoes carrying dirty plates through the back hallway. Nobody ever had. That was why Leah saw everything. Rain lashed against the tall windows of the Grand Aurelia, turning the city lights outside into trembling gold ribbons. The storm had been growling over the skyline all evening, rattling the glass and making the old service elevators groan like tired animals. Upstairs, the private charity gala had finally ended after hours of speeches, champagne, soft music, and smiling men who donated money with one hand while hiding blood on the other. Leah had worked the event from the first tray of sparkling water to the last abandoned dessert plate. Her feet ached so badly that every step felt like walking on small stones, and the black uniform vest pulled tight across her stomach no matter how often she tugged it down. Her curls had slipped loose from their pins, her cheeks were shiny with sweat, and there was a dark stain near her sleeve from spilled coffee that one guest had blamed on her even though he had knocked the cup over himself. That was how the night usually went for Leah. People looked through her until something went wrong. Then suddenly she became easy to see, easy to blame, easy to laugh at. The banquet captain had snapped at her twice for being too slow, even though she had carried trays heavier than anyone else's, and stayed late after 2 servers called out sick. One of the younger waitresses had whispered that Leah moved like a refrigerator in dress shoes. A man at table 6 had asked if she was allowed to eat the leftovers, then laughed with his wife, like it was the cleverest thing anyone had ever said. Leah had heard every word. She always heard. She had simply learned to keep her face still and her voice soft, because rent was due, medicine was expensive, and pride did not pay hospital bills. Mateo did not know most of that. Leah made sure he did not. To him, she was the aunt who came home tired but smiling, who warmed soup on the tiny stove above the laundromat, who helped him line up his toy trains on the windowsill when his chest hurt too much for him to play on the floor. He was gentle in a way that made the world feel too rough for him, with thin wrists, serious eyes, and a heart that had never worked the way it should. The doctors said words Leah understood only because fear had forced her to learn them. Procedures, specialists, waiting lists, risk, payment options. Mateo only understood that sometimes his body felt like a room with not enough air in it, and that someday, when he was better, he wanted to ride a train into the mountains where the clouds touched the trees. That dream was the reason Leah stayed late. It was the reason she swallowed every insult and counted every tip twice before hiding the bills in an envelope under her mattress. It was the reason she kept moving long after her back begged her to stop. So when the last guests floated out through the marble lobby beneath crystal chandeliers, Leah went back into the ballroom with a grey plastic tub and began clearing the tables. The Grand Aurelia looked different after midnight, without the music, without the laughter, without the warm mask of luxury. The hotel felt hollow and watchful. The ballroom smelled of wet roses, melted wax, rich food, and expensive perfume fading into the cold bite of cleaning spray. Somewhere behind the walls, pipes knocked softly. Somewhere below, thunder rolled through the bones of the building. Leah was carrying a stack of folded tablecloths toward the service corridor when she heard the sound. It was small at first, just a hard scrape near the old freight elevator, then a low, muffled groan that made her stop with her hand on the linen cart. She stood very still. The hallway ahead was narrow, lit by buzzing yellow lights, with silver carts lined against one wall, and laundry bins waiting to be taken downstairs. Most workers had already gone to the staff locker room. The whole back wing felt empty, except for the storm and the faint hum of machines. Then came a man's voice, low and sharp. "Keep his head down. If anyone sees his face, this gets messy." Leah's breath caught. She should have turned around. Every sensible part of her knew that. Poor women did not survive by stepping into rich men's secrets. Banquet servers did not ask questions when men in tailored suits moved through service halls after a Mafia-linked gala. Leah had spent her life surviving by noticing danger early and walking the other way. But then the laundry cart rolled into view, and she saw the hand hanging over the side. It was a man's hand, large and pale, with a heavy black ring on one finger. His cuff was expensive, white once, now wrinkled and damp. His body was half buried beneath a heap of hotel linen, but his head had slipped to one side. Leah saw dark hair, a strong jaw rough with stubble, and a face drained of color. One of the suited men caught his chin and shoved his head down again with cold impatience. The other held a small syringe between two fingers, already empty. Leah pressed herself behind a tall shelf stacked with folded towels. Her heart beat so loudly she was sure they would hear it. The men stopped near the freight elevator. One checked his phone. The other looked toward the back exit and cursed under his breath. "The storm knocked out the lower gate," he said. "We have to wait until Sable's driver gets around to the loading dock." Sable. Leah did not know why the name made the air feel colder. Maybe it was the way he said it, not like a friend, but like a man repeating the name of someone too dangerous to disappoint. The man in the cart moved again. It was barely anything, a twitch, a faint breath. But it was enough. He was alive. Leah stared at him, trapped between fear and the kind of guilt that had shaped her whole life. She thought of Mateo asleep under his train blanket, trusting that the world still had good people in it, because Leah kept pretending it did. She thought of the times strangers had stepped around her when she dropped groceries on the bus, or watched her struggle up the laundromat stairs with medicine and soup and never offered a hand. She thought of how easy it was for people to decide someone else was not their problem. The two men walked a few steps away, arguing quietly near the corner. Leah's fingers tightened around the linen in her arms. "No," she told herself. "Do not do this. Do not be stupid. Do not make Mateo an orphan because you wanted to be brave for 1 second." But the man in the laundry cart made a faint sound, broken and helpless, and that was what ruined her. Leah moved before courage had time to leave her. She slipped out from behind the shelf, pushed her own linen cart forward, and blocked the view from the corner. Her hands shook as she pulled back the top layer of sheets. The man was heavier than she expected, solid beneath the fine suit, all broad shoulders and dead weight. She whispered an apology to him even though he could not hear her, then used every bit of strength in her aching body to shift him from one cart to the other. Pain shot through her lower back. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. She nearly dropped him once, biting down hard on a cry as his shoulder hit the cart rail. The men were still arguing. The storm helped her, thunder cracking so loudly the hallway lights flickered. She buried him beneath clean linen, stacked towels over his body, and draped a stained tablecloth across the top. Then she pushed. The cart felt impossible at first, its wheels catching against the uneven floor, but Leah knew the hotel's back corridors better than any manager in a clean suit. She knew which doors stuck, which cameras had blind spots, which elevator groaned but still worked if you held the button down. She had spent years being invisible in those halls, and now invisibility became the only weapon she had. Behind her, one of the men cursed. Leah did not look back. She turned down the dishwashing corridor, past steaming sinks and silent racks of glasses, then into the old staff passage that ran behind the kitchens. The cart rattled too loudly. Her shoes slipped on the wet tile. The man under the linen gave one shallow breath, then another. She kept whispering, almost to him, almost to herself, "Stay alive. Just stay alive. Please stay alive." When she reached the service door near the alley, the rain hit her like thrown gravel. Cold water soaked her hair and uniform in seconds. The loading area was empty except for overflowing trash bins and the old delivery van from the laundromat downstairs, the one Mr. Alvarez let her borrow when Mateo had hospital appointments and the buses ran late. Leah should not have had the keys. She had forgotten to return them after the last appointment. That tiny mistake, that ordinary little piece of luck, suddenly felt like fate reaching out with shaking hands. Getting the man from the cart into the van took everything she had. Twice she nearly slipped. Once his head rolled against her shoulder and his breath brushed her neck, faint and cold. Up close, he smelled like rain, expensive smoke, and something bitter from the drug in his skin. His face was beautiful in a hard, dangerous way, the kind of face carved for shadows instead of sunlight. Even unconscious, he looked like someone people obeyed. Leah hated that she noticed. She hated even more that she was afraid of him, and afraid for him at the same time. By the time she drove away from the Grand Aurelia, her hands were cramped around the steering wheel. She kept expecting headlights to flare behind her. She kept expecting a gunshot, a shout, the black shape of another car sliding out of the storm. But the city swallowed her whole. Rain blurred the windshield. Sirens wailed somewhere far off. The rich part of town gave way to closed shops, dark apartment windows, old brick buildings, and streets where puddles shone under broken streetlights. Her apartment sat above Alvarez Laundry, reached by a narrow staircase that always smelled like soap, coins, and warm metal. Leah parked in the alley and sat still for one breath, then another, shaking so badly she could barely open the van door. She had no plan. She had saved a man from being taken, but now she had brought danger home, worse than home, to Mateo. The thought nearly made her sick. But leaving the stranger in the van was not an option. He was burning with fever now, his skin clammy, his pulse uneven beneath her fingers. Leah dragged, pushed, and half carried him up the stairs, one painful step at a time, stopping often to listen for movement below. By the time she got him into her small living room, she was soaked, trembling, and breathing so hard her chest hurt. She laid him on the faded couch, pulled off his wet jacket, and found the place near his neck where the needle had gone in. A dark bruise had already started to bloom. Mateo appeared in the hallway wearing his soft blue pajamas and holding his favorite toy train against his chest. "Tia Leah," he whispered. "Who is that?" Leah froze. For one terrible second, she wanted to lie. She wanted to say he was no one, just someone from work, just someone who needed help. But Mateo's eyes were too open, too trusting. So she knelt in front of him, her wet uniform clinging to her knees, and touched his cheek. "He is someone who got hurt," she said softly. "I am going to help him for tonight, and then we will figure out what to do. Is he bad?" Leah looked back at the man on her couch. His hands were scarred. A gun was tucked under his waistband, which she had not noticed until now. Her stomach dropped. Slowly, carefully, she removed it with 2 fingers and set it high on the kitchen cabinet, where Mateo could never reach. Then she turned back to her nephew and forced her voice to stay calm. "I do not know yet." Mateo considered this in the grave way he considered everything. Then he walked past her, slow and careful, and placed his little toy train on the edge of the coffee table beside the unconscious stranger. "So he will not be scared when he wakes up sick," Mateo said. Something inside Leah cracked open. Not loudly, not all at once, just enough to hurt. She pulled Mateo into her arms, holding him gently, because his small body tired easily, and pressed her face into his hair. The stranger did not move. The storm tapped against the windows. Downstairs, one of the washing machines thumped through a heavy cycle like a tired heart refusing to stop. Leah did what she could. She checked the man's breathing. She wiped rain and sweat from his face. She called no ambulance because she had already seen enough to know hospitals might not be safe for him or for her. She searched his pockets and found no wallet, no phone, nothing but a black card with no name and a folded paper marked with a symbol she did not understand. His shirt was handmade. His watch looked worth more than the building. Every detail screamed that he belonged to a world where poor women disappeared without becoming news. Near dawn, the fever broke. Leah was sitting on the floor beside the couch with a kitchen knife in one hand and her phone in the other, ready to call for help if he stopped breathing. Mateo had fallen asleep again in her bed, curled around his pillow, the faint whistle of his breath drifting through the open door. The apartment had gone quiet except for the rain easing into a soft gray morning. Then the stranger opened his eyes. Leah stopped breathing. They were dark eyes, not confused, not weak, not grateful. For one heartbeat, they looked almost empty, like the eyes of a man waking from death and deciding whether the world deserved to continue. Then his hand shot out and closed around Leah's wrist. She gasped, dropping the knife. It hit the floor with a dull clatter. His grip was firm but not crushing, and still it filled the room with warning. "Where am I?" he asked. His voice was rough, low, and calm in a way that frightened her more than shouting would have. Leah swallowed. "My apartment. Above the laundromat on Mason Street. You were drugged. Men were taking you out of the hotel in a laundry cart. I got you out." His eyes sharpened. "The Grand Aurelia?" She nodded. His jaw tightened, and something cold moved across his face. "Who are you?" Leah almost laughed because it was such a ridiculous question after the night she had survived. She was nobody. She was the woman with wet shoes by the couch. She was the server people snapped at. She was Mateo's aunt, and most days that was the only title that mattered. "Leah Moreno," she said. "I work banquets at the hotel. Please let go of my wrist." For a moment, he did not. His gaze moved over her face, her damp curls, the tired shadows under her eyes, the soft roundness of her body in the stretched black uniform. Leah waited for the look she knew too well, the quick dismissal, the little flicker of judgment people thought she did not see. It did not come. He looked at her like he was trying to understand how someone the world had trained itself to ignore had managed to steal him out from under the noses of men paid to erase him. Slowly, he released her. "You saved my life," he said. Leah rubbed her wrist and pushed herself back. "I saved a stranger. I did not know who you were." At that, the smallest shadow of a smile touched his mouth, but there was no warmth in it. "No," he said. "You did not." He sat up, and even wounded, even pale, even with a blanket slipping from his shoulders, the room seemed to shrink around him. Leah felt it then, the weight of him. Not just his size, not just the danger in his stillness, but the invisible power that followed certain men like a storm cloud. He looked toward the cabinet. "My gun," he said. "On top of the cabinet," Leah replied, "away from the child." His head turned slowly back to her. "Child?" Before Leah could answer, Mateo appeared again in the bedroom doorway, sleepy and small, dragging his blanket behind him. He looked from Leah to the stranger, then to the toy train still resting on the coffee table. "You woke up," Mateo said. The man stared at him. Something changed in his face so quickly, Leah almost missed it. The cold did not vanish, but it cracked, just a little. Mateo stepped closer before Leah could stop him. "That is my mountain train. You can hold it if you want. I use it when I have bad hospital days." The stranger looked at the toy train, then at the boy's thin hand offering it to him. For the first time since he opened his eyes, he seemed truly speechless. Leah saw his throat move. He took the toy with care that felt almost painful to watch, as if the little train weighed more than a weapon. "Thank you," he said quietly. Mateo smiled, then coughed into his sleeve. Leah was beside him at once, guiding him to the chair, checking his color, smoothing his hair back. The stranger watched every movement. His eyes missed nothing. Not the pill organizer on the counter, not the stack of medical bills tucked beneath a chipped mug, not the way Leah's hands trembled only after Mateo stopped coughing. "What is wrong with him?" he asked. Leah's shoulders stiffened. "That is not your business." "No," he said, and his voice lowered. "It is not. But someone nearly killed me last night, and you brought me into your home anyway. That makes everything in this room my concern, until I know who is coming through that door." Leah stared at him, anger warming her fear. "You do not get to wake up on my couch and take over my life." His gaze held hers. Most people would have looked away. Leah did not. Then he said, very softly, "I am Dante Rourke." The name landed in the apartment like a glass breaking in the dark. Leah had heard it before. Everyone in the city had heard it, though never too loudly. Dante Rourke, the man behind restaurants that never lost money, construction firms that always won bids, nightclubs where politicians entered through back doors, and rumors that made grown men drop their voices. Dante Rourke, whose enemies moved away, vanished, or suddenly discovered religion. Dante Rourke, whose name had floated through the hotel kitchen last night in nervous whispers before the gala began. Leah stood so fast, the chair scraped behind her. "No," she whispered. Dante looked at her without apology. "No, no, no." Leah backed away, one hand over her mouth. "I thought you were just hurt. I thought you were some businessman, some guest. I did not know. I brought you here. I brought you near Mateo." Mateo looked between them, confused. "Is he famous?" Leah could not answer. Her mind was already racing ahead to every terrible ending. The men in suits, the name Sable, the drug, the back entrance, her apartment, her nephew, her whole life hanging by a thread she had not even known she was holding. Dante rose from the couch, slower than he probably wanted to, one hand bracing against the armrest. He was still weak, but the danger in him had awakened fully now. His eyes went to the window, then the door, then the old fire escape beyond the kitchen. He was counting exits, measuring risk, becoming the kind of man his name promised. "You said men took me," he said. "Tell me exactly what you heard." Leah shook her head. "I do not want any part of this. You already have one." The words were not cruel. That made them worse. Leah looked at Mateo, who was still watching with worried eyes, and lowered her voice. One of them said, "Sable, that is all I know." For the first time, Dante Rourke looked truly dangerous. Not angry in the loud way, not shocked, just still. So still the air seemed to draw back from him. "Victor," he said. The name came out like a locked door opening to something buried and terrible. Leah felt the room tilt under her. Outside, morning traffic began to whisper through the wet street below. Downstairs, the laundromat bell jingled as someone came in with a bag of clothes, ordinary life continuing as if Leah had not pulled a wounded Mafia boss out of a hotel and carried him into the only home Mateo had. Dante took one step toward the window, his hand closing around the little toy train Mateo had given him, and for one strange second, the hard line of his face softened with a grief so old it seemed carved into him. Then the softness disappeared. "Leah Moreno," he said, turning back to her, "you did not just save me from being killed. You saved me from the one man close enough to bury me without anyone asking questions." Leah's mouth went dry. What does that mean? And Dante's eyes moved to Mateo, then back to her, and the answer settled over the small apartment like the last shadow before a storm. "It means Victor Sable will come looking for me," he said, "and when he finds out who helped me, he will come looking for you." Victor Sable did not come that morning. That was the mercy. The terror was knowing that he would. Leah stood in the center of her tiny apartment above the laundromat while the city woke beneath her feet, while washers spun downstairs and buses hissed along the wet street, while ordinary people bought coffee, folded shirts, complained about the rain, and lived in a world that had not yet cracked open. Dante Rourke stood by her window with Mateo's little toy train still resting in his hand, his face turned toward the glass, his eyes searching the street below like he could see danger before it had a shape. Leah wanted to scream at him to leave. She wanted to shove his gun into his hands, open the door, and send him back into whatever dark kingdom had made him. But Mateo was sitting at the kitchen table in his blue pajamas, quietly watching them both, and Leah knew children could feel fear even when adults tried to hide it. So she swallowed the scream. She did what she had always done. She made breakfast because toast was something she understood, because orange juice was normal, because Mateo needed his medicine with food, and because if she stopped moving, she might fall apart. Dante watched her from across the room as she buttered the toast with shaking hands. He did not speak for a long time. That silence should have made him feel less dangerous, but it did the opposite. It made him feel like a storm waiting politely at the door. He had asked her to tell him everything again, and she had. The men in the hotel corridor, the syringe, the laundry cart, the service elevator, the name Sable, the private foundation mentioned in a low voice near the back hall. Each detail made Dante colder, quieter, sharper. Leah could almost see the pieces connecting behind his eyes. She had thought Victor Sable was simply another criminal name, but Dante's face told her it was something more personal than betrayal and deeper than business. When she finally asked who Victor was, Dante did not answer right away. He looked down at the little train in his hand, his thumb resting on the painted roof, and said Victor had been beside him for 15 years. Advisor, friend, family in every way except blood, the kind of man who knew every door, every guard, every fear, and every wound. Then Dante told her about his sister. Her name had been Elena, and he said it with such care that Leah felt the room soften around the sound. Elena had been younger than him, bright and stubborn, the only person who could make him laugh when he was already becoming the kind of man people feared. Years ago, someone had sold her location to Dante's enemies. She was taken from a safe house that only a few trusted people knew about. Dante found her too late. Since then, he had built his life around never trusting softness again. He had turned grief into rules, rules into walls, and walls into an empire so cold and strong that no one could reach the man buried inside it. Victor had helped him build those walls. Now Dante understood that Victor may have helped create the wound that made them necessary. Leah listened with one hand pressed against the counter. She did not want to feel sorry for him. A man like Dante had probably done terrible things. Men whispered his name for a reason, but grief did not care what kind of life a person lived. It sat in the bones the same way. Leah knew that. She had watched Mateo sleep through fevers, watched doctors lower their voices, watched bills pile up like snow against a door. Pain recognized pain, even when it did not forgive it. By noon, Dante had borrowed a burner phone from Mr. Alvarez downstairs after giving the old man a look so calm and heavy that he handed it over without a single question. Dante made 3 calls, each one shorter than the last. No names, no warmth, just instructions that sounded harmless unless a person understood danger. Move the East file. Check the hospital board. Find Nico Bell. Confirm who still answers. Leah pretended not to listen, but every word landed in her chest like a stone. Mateo sat on the floor with his trains, occasionally glancing at Dante with wide, curious eyes. Dante never looked comfortable around the boy. He looked careful, almost afraid of breaking something. That afternoon, Leah's phone rang. It was the hotel. She already knew before she answered. The banquet captain's voice was crisp and fake sad, the kind of voice people use when they are enjoying power, but want it to sound like policy. There had been a complaint, there had been a missing linen cart, there were questions about her conduct during a high-profile event. Until further notice, her employment was terminated. Leah stood there with the phone against her ear, hearing her own life shrink. No job meant no rent. No rent meant no apartment. No apartment meant no safe place for Mateo between hospital visits. She thanked the woman out of habit, then ended the call and stared at the wall. Dante was watching her. Who was that? No one, Leah said. He stepped closer. Leah. She hated the way he said her name, like he already knew the lie and was giving her one chance to set it down. I got fired. Dante's jaw hardened. Because of me. Because I made a choice, she said, sharper than she meant to. Do not take that from me too. For the first time he looked almost wounded. Then he nodded once. Fair. But Victor did not stop with the job. That evening, while Leah was picking up Mateo's prescriptions from the pharmacy 3 blocks away, a black sedan slid to the curb beside her. The passenger window lowered, and Victor Sable smiled out at her like they had an appointment. He was not what she expected. He did not look wild or cruel. He looked polished, handsome in a tired silver way, with neat hair, soft leather gloves, and eyes that seemed kind until she noticed there was nothing behind them. Miss Moreno, he said, you have caused a great deal of concern. Leah's fingers tightened around the paper pharmacy bag. I do not know you. No, Victor said pleasantly, but you know Dante Rourke, or at least you know where he is. Leah felt the street tilt. People passed behind her with umbrellas. A cyclist cursed at a taxi. Life kept moving, as if she were not standing at the edge of a knife. I do not know what you are talking about. Victor sighed, not annoyed, almost sympathetic. You work too hard to be this brave. It is a bad habit poor people learn, because no one gives them permission to be tired. Your nephew is Mateo Moreno, age 8, congenital heart disease. Current medication costs more than your monthly rent. Specialist appointment at St. Agnes tomorrow morning. There is a procedure available, but the hospital has not approved the charity request yet. These things take time. Children like Mateo do not always have time. Leah could not breathe. If you go near him... Victor lifted one hand gently. I am offering help. Real help. Surgery paid in full. Recovery paid in full. A better apartment. Private care. No more begging billing departments for mercy. No more overtime. No more pretending you are not terrified every time that boy coughs. The pharmacy bag crinkled in Leah's fist. For one awful moment, the offer opened in front of her like sunlight after years underground. Mateo safe. Mateo breathing. Mateo growing up. Mateo on his mountain train with pink cheeks and strong lungs and no hospital bracelet around his wrist. Leah hated Victor for knowing exactly where to press. She hated herself more for listening. All I need, Victor said softly, is Dante's location. If he is as dangerous as people say, why should your child suffer for him? Leah's eyes burned. Dante is not my concern. Exactly. Victor smiled wider. You are a practical woman. Call me tonight. He held out a small white card with only a number printed on it. Leah did not take it. Victor leaned out just enough to tuck it into the pharmacy bag himself. His glove brushed her hand, and she went cold all over. Think of Mateo, he said. Not Dante, not loyalty, not some fantasy about being good. Think of the boy who needs you to choose him. Then the sedan pulled away, leaving Leah on the sidewalk with medicine in her hand and the devil's offer in her bag. At the hospital the next morning, the doctor confirmed the cruelty of timing. Mateo needed the procedure sooner than expected. Not someday, not next year, soon. The doctor tried to be gentle, but numbers are not gentle when they decide whether a child gets to live. Leah nodded through the explanation. She signed papers she did not fully understand. She smiled for Mateo when he asked if the doctor was going to fix the tired part of his heart. Then she stepped into the restroom, locked herself in a stall, and broke silently, both hands over her mouth so nobody would hear. When she came home, Dante was sitting at her kitchen table with maps, printouts, and a black laptop that did not belong to her. He looked up once and saw everything. Leah hated that too. She did not want to be readable. She had survived by keeping her pain folded small. "Victor came to me," she said. Dante went very still. "He knows about Mateo. He offered to pay for everything if I tell him where you are." The room changed. It did not become louder. It became deeper, as if the floor had dropped beneath them. Dante stood slowly. "And what did you tell him?" "Nothing yet." "Yet," Dante repeated. Leah flinched at the coldness in his voice, then anger rose hot through her fear. "Do not do that. Do not stand there like I owe you an easy answer. You are not the one watching an 8-year-old boy get tired from walking to the bathroom. You are not the one counting pills and tips and late fees. You are not the one hearing a doctor say soon when you have no money and no job. So yes, I thought about it. I thought about taking his offer. I thought about saving Mateo and letting your world eat itself without me." Dante's face did not move, but something in his eyes shifted. He said nothing. Leah pulled Victor's card from the pharmacy bag and threw it onto the table. "But I will not do it. I will not hand a man over to someone who drugged him and hid him in a laundry cart. I will not teach Mateo that love means becoming cruel when life scares you. I cannot control what your world does, Dante, but I can control who I become inside mine." Dante looked at the card. Then he looked at her, and for the first time since she had met him, the feared boss of the city seemed truly shaken. Not by violence, not by strategy, by her, by the simple, impossible fact that she had been offered the one thing she needed most, and still refused to betray him. "In my world," he said quietly, "people sell each other for less than a parking space. I am not in your world." "No," Dante said, voice low. "You are better than it." Leah turned away because the words hurt more than the insults ever had. Kindness was dangerous when she could not afford to believe in it. That same night, Dante arranged Mateo's treatment. Leah fought him. She told him she would not sell her loyalty. He told her he was not buying it. She told him she would not let him use Mateo as a debt. He told her debt had nothing to do with a child's heart. His voice was firm but not harsh. He said Mateo had shown kindness to a man everyone else would have left to die, and Leah had done the same. That deserved protection. No bargain, no chain, no price. The procedure was scheduled for the following week. Leah cried after Mateo fell asleep, but this time she did not do it in the bathroom. She sat at the kitchen table with her face in her hands, and Dante sat across from her without touching her, without trying to fix the moment with grand promises. He simply stayed. For Leah, who had carried everything alone for so long that loneliness felt like weather, his quiet presence was almost too much to bear. The search for proof began in the hotel records. Leah had not been only a server. Before life turned narrow, before hospital bills and rent and exhaustion, she had studied data management at community college, with dreams of working in systems, maybe running operations for a real company someday. She had loved patterns, clean rows, hidden links, the little truth that numbers revealed when people thought nobody was looking. At the Grand Aurelia, she had often helped the event office when their staff fell behind. She had seen invoices, donor forms, room charges, vendor accounts and foundation payments pass across desks, while managers treated her like furniture. Victor's private foundation had hosted 3 events there in 2 years. Leah remembered the strange details others ignored because poor people are trained to notice what powerful people forget to hide. Dante brought in old statements, hotel files, donor lists, and shell company names. Leah sat beside him at the laundromat apartment table until late night blurred into early morning. Mateo slept in the bedroom with a new medical monitor beside him, its soft green light blinking through the dark. Dante's men wanted to move them somewhere safer, but Leah refused until the procedure. Dante did not like it. For once, he listened anyway. The pattern appeared slowly, then all at once, fake donations moved through Victor's foundation, then split into smaller payments. Some went to officials, some went to police. Some went to accounts tied to men who had recently stopped answering Dante's calls. Leah found repeated hotel charges under one donor name that matched a room booked years earlier. On the same week, Dante's sister died. Her hands went cold as she traced the final transfer. It was small compared to the others, almost hidden. But it led to a private security contractor, and from there to a safe house address that had been leaked on the exact day Elena was taken. Dante did not speak when Leah showed him. He only stared at the screen. The apartment seemed to hold its breath around him. "I am sorry," Leah whispered. Dante's hand rested on the table, open and still. Leah looked at it for a long moment before she placed her fingers over his. She expected him to pull away. Instead, his hand closed around hers, carefully at first, then with quiet desperation. His face remained hard, but his grief moved through his grip like something alive. "Victor did not just betray you now," she said softly. "No," Dante said. "He made me into the man he needed me to be." The next day, they returned to the hotel through the service entrance to copy one final set of records from the event office archive. It was reckless, but Dante needed original files, not just digital copies Victor could claim were forged. Leah knew the route. Dante knew the risk. They went during a shift change, dressed as maintenance staff, with caps low and badges borrowed from someone Dante trusted. For a while, it worked. They moved through the back corridors like ghosts, past laundry bins, food carts, and staff who were too busy to notice them. Leah's hands shook as she unlocked the archive cabinet with a code she had watched an assistant manager use 100 times. Dante stood behind her, scanning the hall. They found the donor files in a blue storage box on the bottom shelf. Leah copied what she could, then slid the originals into a plain folder beneath her jacket. That was when the lights flickered. Dante turned toward the hallway. "Leah," he said softly, "move." The first gunshot cracked against the doorframe before she could ask why. Dante pulled her down behind a metal desk, his body covering hers as glass shattered above them. Men shouted in the corridor. Leah clutched the folder to her chest, so hard the papers bent. Dante returned fire only twice, calm and precise, then pulled her toward the back exit of the archive room. They ran through a narrow service passage that smelled of dust and old carpet glue, down a stairwell, past roaring machines and steam pipes. Leah's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. Fear made the hotel endless. Behind them, footsteps thundered closer. The underground service tunnels beneath the Grand Aurelia were older than the hotel's polished face, built for deliveries, trash removal, and quiet exits powerful guests never wanted listed. Leah had used them only once during a kitchen flood, but she remembered enough. Left at the boiler room, right past the old wine storage, down the ramp with the broken yellow rail. Dante stayed beside her, one hand at her back, not pushing, not dragging, just there. When a man appeared at the end of the tunnel, Dante stepped in front of Leah so fast she barely saw him move. The fight was brief, brutal, and mostly shadow. Leah kept running when Dante told her to run, even though every instinct screamed to look back. By the time they burst out near the old loading dock, rain had started again. Nico Bell was waiting in a black car with the engine on. He was lean, gray-eyed, and scarred across one cheek, a man who looked like he had been living in hiding, with one hand on a weapon for years. Dante got Leah into the back seat first, then slid in beside her as Nico drove hard into the wet night. "You were right about Victor," Nico said. Dante looked down at the folder in Leah's hands. No, she was. Nico glanced at her through the mirror. "Then I guess the city owes you, Miss Moreno." Leah held the evidence tighter and looked out at the hotel shrinking behind them. "The city does not owe me anything," she said. "I just want my nephew to live." The tribunal was set for the same day as Mateo's procedure. Leah hated the timing with a bitterness she could taste. Dante tried to tell her he could delay one or the other, but there was no delaying a child's failing heart, and Victor had already called the old families together for a memorial dinner meant to crown himself as the steady hand after Dante's so-called disappearance. If Dante missed it completely, Victor would take control of the empire before nightfall. If Dante went, Leah would be alone at the hospital, waiting for the most important news of her life. "I will be fine," she told him in the hospital hallway, though her voice was thin. Dante looked at Mateo through the glass. The boy was in the bed, small beneath the blanket, holding his toy train with both hands. Dante had brought him a new one that morning, a silver mountain engine with blue windows, but Mateo still kept the old chipped train close. Dante turned back to Leah. "I put men on every entrance. No one gets near this floor without my approval." Leah nodded. She wanted to thank him. She wanted to tell him she was scared. She wanted to tell him that somewhere between the rain, the records, the couch, and the way he listened when Mateo spoke, he had stopped being only the dangerous man she had saved. But the words were too large for the hallway. Dante seemed to understand anyway. He touched her cheek with the backs of his fingers, so gentle it almost undid her. "I will come back," he said. "You have an empire to save." His eyes held hers. "I know what I have to save." Then he left. Mateo was taken into surgery just after noon. Leah sat in the waiting room with her hands clasped so tightly her fingers hurt. Minutes became hours. Every time a door opened, her heart jumped. Every time a doctor passed without stopping, she forgot how to breathe. Outside, thunder rolled softly over the city, and the hospital windows reflected her tired face back at her. She looked older than she was, round cheeks pale, hair pulled back too tightly, uniform replaced by a borrowed sweater Dante's men had brought, because her own clothes still smelled like hotel dust and rain. She wondered when she had last slept. She wondered how many prayers a person could say before God became tired of hearing the same name. Then Victor arrived. He stepped out of the elevator alone, wearing a dark suit and a calm smile. For a moment, no one moved. The guards near the nurses' station reached beneath their jackets, but Victor lifted both hands slightly. "Relax," he said. "Hospitals make everyone dramatic." Leah stood. Her fear was real, sharp and cold, but she did not let him see it take her. "You should leave." Victor smiled. "You should have taken my offer. There are guards here." "Yes," Victor said, glancing at them. "Dante's guards. Which means Dante left you here because he believed fear could be managed with men at doors. That has always been his mistake. He protects places. I study people." Leah's stomach twisted. "You cannot have him." "I do not need him," Victor said. "I need Dante to choose. His empire or you. Power or softness. He failed that test with Elena. I wonder if he will fail it again." Before Leah could answer, one of the elevator doors opened behind Victor. More men stepped out, dressed like hospital staff, but their shoes were wrong and their eyes were too alert. Dante's guards moved at once. The hallway erupted into chaos, but Leah did not run. She backed toward the surgical waiting room door, keeping herself between Victor and the hallway that led to Mateo. Victor watched her and laughed softly. "Look at you," he said. "A banquet server playing queen." Leah lifted her chin. "Better than a coward playing loyal friend." The smile left his face. That was when Dante appeared at the far end of the hall. He had not come with an army. He had come like a man who had torn himself away from history because the present mattered more. His coat was wet from rain. His face was hard, his eyes fixed on Victor with a kind of fury so controlled it barely looked human. Nico was beside him with two men Leah recognized from the laundromat watch. The hospital guards moved in behind Victor's fake staff, closing the trap Dante had already set. Victor looked almost pleased. "You came back." Dante did not look at him. His eyes went to Leah first, scanning her face, her hands, the space around her. Only after he knew she was unharmed did he turn to Victor. "I did." Then you missed the tribunal, Victor said. They are waiting for me now. No, Dante said. They are waiting for the truth. Victor's confidence flickered. Nico stepped forward, holding up a phone. The gathering had been delayed. Every old boss in that room had already received copies of the foundation records, the hotel files, the police payments, the transfer tied to Elena's location. Dante had not abandoned the tribunal. He had moved it around Victor without letting him know. For the first time, Victor Sable looked afraid. The confrontation that followed did not belong to Leah. It belonged to men who had built their lives on silence and power, to old families who cared less about goodness than betrayal, less about mercy than order. Dante brought Victor to the memorial dinner not as a rival, but as evidence. Leah was not there to see the long table go quiet when the records were placed before them. She did not see Victor's denials shrink under the weight of his own accounts. She did not hear the old bosses turn away from him one by one, disgusted not because he was cruel, but because he had been faithless. Nico told her later that Dante spoke only once about Elena, and when he did, every man in the room lowered his eyes. Victor Sable's power ended that night beneath chandeliers and old portraits, destroyed not by bullets, but by the papers a hotel server had refused to drop in a service tunnel. Dante did not stay to enjoy the victory. He returned to the hospital before the doctor came out. Leah was standing by then, unable to sit any longer. Her whole body felt hollow with waiting. When she saw Dante step into the room, alive and breathing and looking only at her, something inside her gave way. She crossed the space between them without thinking. He caught her carefully, his arms closing around her as if she were something precious and breakable, though Leah had never been treated like either before. "Did you win?" she whispered. Dante held her tighter. "We did." Before she could answer, the surgical doors opened. The doctor stepped out in blue scrubs, mask hanging loose around her neck. Leah pulled away from Dante so fast she nearly stumbled. The doctor smiled, tired but real. "Mateo did well," she said. "The procedure was successful. We still have recovery ahead, but his heart responded beautifully." Leah made a sound that was not quite a sob and not quite a laugh. Her knees weakened. Dante caught her again before she hit the floor, and this time Leah did not pull away. She turned into his chest and cried with the full weight of every night she had been strong, because there had been no other choice. Dante held her in the middle of the waiting room while rain softened against the windows. He did not tell her to stop. He did not tell her she was safe, as if words could make it true. He simply held her until she believed she did not have to carry the whole world alone. The weeks after that were quiet in a way Leah did not trust at first. Quiet had always been the pause before the next bill, the next fever, the next cruel surprise. But this quiet stayed. Mateo recovered slowly, then steadily. Color returned to his face. His laugh grew stronger. He began walking the hospital hallway, with Leah on one side and Dante on the other, pretending the tile lines were train tracks. The nurses whispered about Dante, of course. Everyone did. But Mateo only knew him as the serious man who brought train books, listened to long stories about mountain tunnels, and never once looked bored. Leah and Mateo moved out of the apartment above the laundromat, though Leah cried the day they left because it had been small and tired and theirs. Dante found them a safe home with sunlight, a real bedroom for Mateo, and a kitchen where Leah could turn around without bumping into the refrigerator. She told him she would pay him back. He told her she could try for the next 100 years if it made her feel better. She enrolled in classes again. Data management at first, then financial systems, then foundation compliance, because she had learned exactly how much darkness could hide in clean paperwork. Dante did not ask her to become part of his empire. That was what surprised her most. He gave her room to choose. He protected without trapping. He listened when she said no. And slowly, because trust is not a door but a road, Leah began to walk toward him. Dante changed too, though not in ways the city could easily see. To his enemies, he remained Dante Rourke, calm, dangerous, impossible to corner. But to Mateo, he became the man who knew how to build wooden tracks across the living room. To Leah, he became the man who woke from nightmares and let her touch his hand after, the man who spoke about Elena without turning grief into ice, the man who looked at Leah's soft body not like it was something to overlook or forgive, but like it was part of the home he had never known how to want. He never made her feel small for taking up space. He made space around her, and somehow that was more intimate than any promise. Months later, when Mateo was strong enough, Dante arranged the train ride. Not a private jet, not a black car, not some grand display of money trying to replace a dream. A train, a real one, with wide windows and blue seats, and a route that climbed toward the mountains as morning light spilled over the world. Mateo pressed his face to the glass, laughing every time the tracks curved along the river. Leah sat across from him, watching his reflection in the window, healthy and bright-eyed, his little hands wrapped around the silver train Dante had given him. Dante stood beside Leah in the aisle for a while, before sitting next to her. Outside, the city fell away. Buildings became fields. Fields became hills. Far ahead, the mountains rose soft and blue beneath the clouds. Leah looked at Dante and saw the man people whispered about. Yes, the danger was still there. It would always be there. But she also saw the wounded stranger on her couch, the man holding a child's toy like it might save him, the brother who had lost too much, the king who had regained an empire and still chosen to come back to a hospital waiting room. Mateo shouted from the window that the mountains looked like giants sleeping under blankets. Leah laughed, and the sound surprised her with how light it was. Dante reached for her hand. He did not take it like he owned it. He waited. Leah looked down at his open palm, then placed her hand in his. For so long, the world had treated her kindness like weakness. It had called her body a burden, her softness a flaw, her quiet survival something ordinary and forgettable. But Leah knew the truth now. Her kindness had carried a dying man through a storm. Her courage had stood against an offer that could have broken her. Her mind had found the truth hidden beneath money and lies. Her love had kept Mateo alive long enough to see the mountains. Dante leaned close, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "You gave me back my heart, Leah." She looked at Mateo laughing in the sunlight, then at the mountains waiting beyond the glass, and finally at the dangerous man beside her, who had learned, slowly and painfully, how to be gentle. "No," she whispered, "I think you still had it. You just forgot where you buried it." Dante smiled then, not the cold smile of a feared boss, not the sharp smile of a man planning revenge, but something small and real, and almost boyish. Leah rested her head against his shoulder as the train carried them higher, away from the smoke of the city and into the bright quiet Mateo had dreamed of for so long. Dante had reclaimed his empire, but Leah had claimed something greater. She had claimed the right to be seen, to be loved, to be safe without becoming hard, and to believe that even after the darkest night, a life could still open like a window toward the mountains.